In late antiquity, the Roman Empire was constantly engaged in multiple crises. Although, since the transformation from republic to empire, Rome reached its furthest expansion, the power of the emperor and the question of succession became one major problem for the stability of the empire. Many times, the death of an emperor would lead to a civil war where numerous claimants aspired to become the ruler. The massive empire would also be divided into a western and an eastern part, while at the same time both entities faced countless invasions from outer foes. In our last episode, we stopped in the time of Emperor Diokletian, who tried to establish a new type of succession system, the Tetrarchy, which would shortly bring stability, but died with him. And once more, the empire experienced an existential crisis. Would the empire endure? Did West and East reunite or stay divided? And most importantly, did Rome really come to an end in late antiquity? Today we will pick up this history of the end of the Roman Empire, and we will look into the deeds of Constantine the Great, the dangers of the Hunnic and Germanic invasions, the decrease of Western Roman power, and the disposition of its last emperor. Welcome to the second video in this series about the end of the Roman Empire. After the failure of the Tetrarchy, the empire found itself again in a period of inner instability until a man named Constantine defeated his last rival on the battlefield. Constantine, later known as the Great, is primarily known for being the first Christian emperor. In fact, his reign marked an important turning point, for not much later, Christianity would become the Roman state religion. Nevertheless, Constantine did even more than this. After his victory in the civil war, he was the only Roman emperor, meaning there were no other Augusti, Caesars, or other claimants that contested his authority. Instead of splitting up his power, as Diocletian tried in order to gain stability, he did the opposite and concentrated the power again in his own hands. He established a dynastic succession where only his sons and nephews would serve as Caesars, while there would be only one single Augustus to rule the whole empire. Constantine's strict rule eventually succeeded in creating stability and allowed him to focus on another project which had the greatest impact on Roman history: the establishment of Nova Roma, or as it would soon be called, Constantinople. Constantine chose the ancient Greek city of Byzantium to be his new capital. He invested heavily in multiple building projects, such as palaces, churches, forums, and walls. He recognized the strategic potential of the city and its ability to be well defendable, a significant difference to Rome itself. The new city flourished quickly, and even parts of the old nobility of Rome and other cities moved to Constantinople. The new city's location at the edge of two continents wasn't only chosen well for military purposes, but also for trade, especially concerning the goods of the Silk Road, like spices, silk, or perfumes. Although Nova Roma grew rapidly, it would not surpass the original Rome in population and significance until the 6th century. Constantine's dismissal of Diocletian's Tetrarchy, his stabilization of the empire through force and authority, his acceptance of Christianity, and the foundations of Constantinople as the soon-to-be most important city in the Mediterranean were his most important doings and would shape the empire immensely. As you may already imagine, after Constantine's death, although we had a short period of stability, the civil wars returned, as well as threats from outside. But even without external pressure, the empire was far from stable. After a series of both capable and incapable emperors, one of the most brutal civil wars occurred in the late 4th century. Those wars, in which again the claimants of both East and West battled each other, exemplifies the weakening of the Roman Empire, as the losses suffered by both halves were immense. The winner of the conflict in the late 4th century was Theodosius, who some historians see as the last emperor that ruled over the entire empire in the year 394. However, he already died a few months after his victory, and with his death, the empire was finally split, for he did not choose a single heir, but divided the empire between his two sons. Honorius became emperor of the western half, while Arcadius ruled in the east. The empire would never reunite again until the 5th century. More than that, the two halves would continue to engage frequently in civil wars between one another, mainly for installing their preferred claimant as emperor of their counterpart. Of course, we had seen conflicts like this in the centuries before, but the inner fighting between the two Roman entities had reached a new intensity and gravely shattered the stability, peculiarly for the western part. The impact of those inner wars can't be exaggerated, for they were constantly accompanied by numerous new invasions from outer foes of the empire, which in this time were even more severe than before. And with the Roman armies severely weakened by fighting each other, there wasn't enough strength left to face some of the most dangerous invasions Rome had ever experienced. The forces of the empires wouldn't stand together to fight the incursions off. Each emperor would usually deal with invaders only in his own half, without risking to lose his troops defending the other's territory. Even the examples where both emperors could agree on a joint campaign, the coordination and communication were so terrible that they failed even before they really started. Concerning the invasions, the first severe event occurred with the Battle of Adrianople, where the Visigoths and their allies started a rebellion and fought against the forces of the Eastern Empire. The battle was a devastating defeat for the Romans, and a great portion of their army was lost. In the aftermath of this battle, diplomatic attempts to settle the conflict failed, and the war continued on the Apennine Peninsula. The management of this crisis through the son of Theodosius, the Western Roman Emperor Honorius, was so disastrous that the Visigoths under Alaric finally decided to sack Rome itself, without any other battle against any Roman army. The city had not been conquered for 800 years, and the damage to people and buildings was considerably. Perhaps even worse than this, the war continued later on in Gaul and Spain, where the Visigoths successively would end Roman rule and establish their own kingdom. Simultaneously to the war of the Visigoths in Italy, north of the Alps, around 406, Germanic and Iranic tribes in never-known numbers, both warriors and their families, crossed into Roman territory. Whether the Huns pushed them further west, or the climatic changes in the region forced a mass migration, or the wealth of the Romans posed a too tempting target, tribes like the Burgundians, Vandals, Suebi, accompanied by the Iranian tribes like the Alans, passed the Rhine River, a natural Roman border, and started pillaging multiple Roman cities. The Romans, while also dealing with the Visigoths in Italy, ordered the legions in Britain to abandon the island and come to aid in the defense of Gaul, leaving the province of Britain unprotected from the soon arriving Saxons, Angles and others. Even though the Romans managed to defeat some of the invaders' armies in Gaul, many tribes managed to move further south into Hispania and later Africa. And after defeating Roman military resistance in all of these provinces, the Vandals, Suebi, Saxons and many others established their own domains inside the Roman borders, while also battling each other. The loss of Africa was especially severe for Rome, for the city couldn't sustain its large population any longer without the grain supply from the province. Despite these already devastating wars, from a Roman perspective, the situation worsened even more when the empire faced a completely new invasion from the Far East. The Huns, which were a purely nomadic people, had, unlike the Visigoths, little interest in settling inside the empire, but came to pillage and loot the wealthy Roman cities. The consequence was a severe war between the Romans and the Huns under the ruler Attila, which resulted in the sacking of the Balkans, Gaul and northern Italy. The Romans under Aetius managed to defeat the Huns in one of the most brutal battles of all antiquity. But only when Attila himself died of disease, the Huns retreated from the Roman lands. Soon after, their empire would shatter, and the Huns themselves would cease to be a threat. The political history, the alliances, wars and diplomacy in this era are highly complex and convoluted, for the tribes didn't simply conquer the Roman territory or saw the Romans as their enemies, but tried through force to be a part of the Roman Empire in order to gain some of the Roman wealth. Therefore, being foe or friend of Rome was highly erratic. For example, the Visigoths and Franks, although they had their intense confrontation with Rome, were often to be found on the Roman side of a battlefield, because they were promised compensation or a legitimation to settle. And even the Huns, before and after their campaign under Attila, were hired as mercenaries to reinforce the Roman armies. To understand this period, we must reject the concept of an arrogant Roman Empire fighting outsiders purely with their own people, and brutal barbarians only hating and destroying the Roman Empire. The situation was rather a hybrid mix of rivalry, alliances, fear, and admiration on all parts. In all those conflicts, the emperors themselves were not able to influence the events to a good outcome. Their power in this time was weak, and what remained of it was not sufficient to stop neither external nor internal threats. The real might was held by military leaders, which were often of Germanic origin. Sometimes those were indeed loyal to Rome, but sometimes they would pursue only their own goals. The troops, mainly consisting of Germanic warriors, would in such a situation maintain their allegiance to their Germanic leaders rather than the weak Roman emperor. Those gamblings in politics, together with the inner wars, made it difficult to stand united against new invasions, even with a Roman army that was still very formidable. But with the unreliable Germanic military leaders and the weak Roman emperors, the other Germanic and Hunnic invaders would meet only little resistance. In the following years, the peace would not return, and constant wars between Romans, Germanic tribes and kingdoms would endure. Many territories were pillaged multiple times during those wars, and Rome itself would suffer 2 more sacks, while Constantinople managed to be spared. In 476, one Germanic leader named Odoacer would ultimately depose the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, without reinstating a new one. The Western Roman Empire would have seen its last emperor. In retrospect, this event would mark a kind of caesura, but for contemporaries not too much would change. The Germanic leaders were in charge for a long time, and emperors were deposed often. Odoacer, although in reality an independent, would formally acknowledge the authority of the Eastern Roman Emperor. For the population of Italy, less would change. The Senate would still be meeting, the people would still speak Latin in most parts of the land, and sooner or later a new emperor or general would replace the old one now in charge. So although we can formally acknowledge the end of the Western Roman Empire in the year 476, there are very different perspectives on the deposition of the last emperor. Some historians see it as the definite end of the Western Empire, while others would argue that with Odoacer's pledge to the Eastern Emperor, the empire was somewhat formally unified again. But this question aside, we can identify many changes and continuities in this period of time. The most obvious change was of course that no new Western Roman emperor was reinstated. But as said before, the power of an emperor in this time was close to non-existent, and some Germanic military leader holding the power was nothing new. The difference was that the power of the military leaders like Odoaces in Italy was now limited to a small area and would not include the whole empire, for the rest of the empire had been taken over by other tribes and newly established kingdoms, and were beyond the control of any Roman emperor or of any Germanic military leader. Instead, all of these new entities would fight regularly against one another to augment their own power. With the dissolution of the empire, the civil life would be disrupted, and the urbanization as well as the trade system would decline on a large scale. While there are many reasons for the loss of Western power, one major point is the lack of a functional succession system in the late Roman period. We saw the start of such succession problems in the last video with the 3rd century crisis and with the many other civil wars that followed. As we have seen, Diocletian had tried to solve the matter by splitting up the power in order to stabilize the empire, but the system failed after his death. Later emperors like Constantine would try the opposite approach and unify the empire again under one central ruler, but in the end this attempt did not succeed either, and imperial rule weakened even more until its final vanishment. On the other hand, Odoacer officially acknowledged the overrule of the Eastern Roman Emperor, while proclaiming himself King of Italy. De facto an independent state, it nevertheless preserved many Roman traditions, such as the legal system, the Senate, and Latin as the predominant language. When talking about continuities, we also need to talk about the Church and the papacy. Not only was it the institution that upheld the written Latin language, even until this very day, it would also act as a semi-political entity, interacting, opposing, or supporting the local, and later every Catholic ruler. In any case, it should not be forgotten that only the Western Empire somehow disappeared in this time, while the Eastern Roman Empire, or often called Byzantine Empire, continued for another 1,000 years. Rome would therefore only end at the end of the medieval ages in 1453, when the Ottomans conquered the Eastern Roman capital of Constantinople. Until then, the Eastern Roman Empire would continue to be the one entity with no interruption of Roman tradition. Although this entity would change culturally to be Greek in language and Christian in religion, the Roman law, the office of the emperor, and even a small senate would be present in its history. This history of the medieval Roman Empire will be the topic of many future videos, where we will see how it became one of the richest and most sophisticated cultures in the medieval ages. This concludes our topic on the inner changes in the late Roman Empire, and I hope to see you soon in future videos. Thank you very much for watching. Valete!